Yeah. Yeah. Okay, London, you want to come up? You want to say hi? Okay, fine. I help you. Ugh. Say hi, Bubba. You're a sweet baby boy. Yes, you are. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amateur Endeavors, where we live life for the love of it. My name is Alora, and today we will be making a sundress. Summer is here. It is hot as heck outside, but that also means that it is sundress season. And so, I am excited for the season. I don't know what it was. I used to be such a tomboy. When I was in my teenage years, I wore nothing but pants and t-shirts. But somewhere along the way, I switched back to my toddler roots of wanting skirts and dresses and everything cutesy. So now, we're going to make a sundress. I've kind of had this on my mind for a little bit. I've got an occasion I'd like to wear it to some point soon. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Make use of that picnic table, picnic basket that we just made. But that is for a later date. For now, we have a dress to make. Alright, the inspiration for this dress actually started with the fabric. So I have this lovely, gorgeous, it's like a white fabric, but it has these blues, these yellows, these greens in this very, very lovely floral pattern. And I have been wanting to use it for a hot minute. Yeah, this was on my Christmas list, I think about a year ago. You know, it's always funny to have to explain to family members why curtains are on your Christmas list. But they had the best patterns. They had the best patterns and the most fabric, okay? I won't apologize for it. But it was funny to explain why I wanted curtains when my mom knew that it didn't match any of my walls. But anyway, besides the point. Beautiful fabric. So now we need to make a design, one that suits the season but also complements and is worthy of such a lovely fabric. So without further ado, come join me for the design phase. Always funny when you have to explain to your mom that you didn't put curtains on your Christmas list to furnish your house, but because you loved the pattern and wanted to make clothes out of it. Alright, so now that we have an idea, now we need to make a plan. So this is my inspiration for this dress. I really kind of wanted to do some sort of halter neck kind of sundress look, and so we're going to be working off of that assumption. Now the base of it's going to be really easy. I'm going to do my old standby. We're going to do a circle skirt. If you need a refresher on how to do one of those, you can just watch my previous video. But it's basic, easy. We're going to cut this on a right angle, and this is going to have a radius of 8. And then from here to here is going to have a radius of 25 inches. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that this one is a little bit shorter than my previous ones. My previous skirts and whatnot, and my circle skirts have almost gone to the floor, but this is a summer dress, so I want it to be a little bit closer to my knee, so I have shortened it quite a bit. But this is going to be our skirt. Easy peasy. No muss, no fuss. And then as we go up, we're gonna run into the waistband. And I'm going to do this in 2 pieces. See, we're going to have the front piece, which is going to be just across the front of my waist, and then we're gonna have the back piece, and this one is going to stretch so that way I can get it on and off without having to use a zipper. So the very front of me is going to be shorter than the back piece. So the front piece is going to be shorter than the back piece, but they are going to have the same height. And I just found this height by going from my kind of waist measurement up to my bust line, just under my bust line, and that's what we're going to get for this and this measurement. And that's just going to be 7 inches. Now the lengths are a little bit different, but mostly you just want to measure that same level of area. So for my front, I measured from side seam to side seam using kind of one of my shirts I was wearing as a reference. And that got me about 20 inches. Now I know that I have to make sure that this bottom piece is long enough to compensate so I can get it over my hips or over my head. See, and usually my hips are sitting at like 48 inches, and so I'm gonna give this just a little bit of extra wiggle room, and we're gonna do 50 inches all around, and so that puts this piece at 30 inches. That gets our waistband, and we'll go more into it on how this is going to stretch, but just know that it will. Now for the skirt, we should only need one, because we just need the one skirt piece. I don't intend to do a liner on this one, but the bodice is going to be different. So for both the waist pieces and the bodice pieces that we'll get to in a second, you're going to cut one regular and then one liner. And this is just going to make sure that we have our nice pretty fabric, but then we also have something to lay over our seams once we start putting the whole thing together. Now onto the bodice. I want to do a halter neck. And so I've never actually successfully done one before, so this might get a little tricky. But basically what I'm going to need is I'm going to need a triangle made of 2 parts. So that way I can add a curve to it, because I am a curved human being. And then I'm just going to take the other end and make it a straight on a slight angle. So this is what will be in the center of my breasts, and it's going to curve so that way I have more space, and then this is just going to be from my neck down past my shoulder and then connecting to the waistband. This one took a little bit of effort to figure out, but mostly what I need is 14 inches this way. See, it doesn't need to be very wide at the top, so we're just going to do 2 inches that way. And the whole front of my bodice needs to measure up to about 20 to 25 inches. Because remember, from up here we have 20 inches for our waist. And so we're going to do 6 inches per piece, because 2 pieces will fit together to cover one side, and then I have 2 sides. So 6 inches should give us enough seam allowance and be good to go. And then this curve I'm going to have to fiddle with a little bit to figure out what works, but we'll get to that later. And then our last piece is just going to be the tie that connects to the bodice and then ties around my neck. And I'm going to cut this at 4 inches so I can just fold it over and sew it down that way. And then the length, I think I'm going to try 16 inches. So that sounds about right, but again, this is going to be something that I'm going to have to fiddle with in the future. That, and I don't have a ton of fabric, so I might need to change some things around. But I tried a piece of string around my neck to see how much I would need to tie, and 16 seemed pretty good. So this is what we're going to start with, and now we need to cut out fabric. Okay, so we've got our pieces cut out, and I have the basic idea of how we're going to make this work. Circle skirt is easy. You sew the two pieces together, you got a circle. Big whoop-de-doo. If you want some more detailed instructions on how to sew a circle skirt, then you can go to my previous video, and I will link that in my description. But what is concerning me is the bodice. That was tricking my brain a little bit. That was making it a little difficult to understand. I think I have it down. I tried laying it against me and seeing how it would fit. It seemed to work well, but ultimately I won't know until I start attaching pieces, which is terrifying. I only have so much of this fabric. But I think we did pretty good. So I think I might try starting with that. Very concerned, very scared. Because I've tried to do one of these before and it didn't work out. We gave up. I gave up. I had to leave it alone. I threw it away and I decided to just do a completely different bodice at the time. This was many moons ago. Long time ago, many years ago. I have learned, I have gained experience, I have tried new things. So hopefully this one will go better. But in case it doesn't, we're going to start there so that way we can make any necessary tweaking and adjustments before we start attaching it to the rest of the skirt. So, let's begin.
Alright, so the first step of this process of making our dress is just going to be sewing along this curved edge. This is just going to be either side of our bodice, and once it's sewn together, it's just going to create a rounded shape so that way it'll fit over our bodice area. And it's just a really simple process. You just sew over the curve and then we will try it on to see how it fits.
To fully do this, we're going to have to do this 4 times, so that way we can have one for each side, plus a liner. But for now, we have sewn 1, because if I did this right, it should be the same on each side, and it should be the same inside and out. But sewing along that curve has now created something of a cup. There, you can kind of see it. Yeah, so we have curvature, we have cuppage. We now have space for it to curve around, and this accomplishes 2 things. 1, it's not as small, so I have more coverage, and I am not small, so now I fit fully without going anywhere. It seems gigantic right now, but if you look at it, it's honestly not. It's still going to be a very cute, very lovely dress, and we're going to lose some of this on the seam allowance as it pulls, but so far, it's not bad. Let's see, let me get this. Okay, if I take into account seam allowance, it's not bad. But I am getting some weird bubbling and buckling, so I think I'm going to take the curve in. I think I went a little too harsh, so I'm going to take this in just a little bit, and hopefully that'll get rid of that bubbling. Cut it down just a little bit, so I'm gonna fold the bottom edge to mimic seam allowance. Hang on. That's about there. Fold that. Yeah, so that fits a lot better. I know you can't really see it from where you're at. Honestly, I don't want you looking that closely at my boobs anyway. But that fits my curvature much better. I had too exaggerated a curve and it was buckling weird, but this is much smoother, much easier, and it doesn't have that weird buckling. So I think that this will do. So I'm going to use this piece as a template for all the other pieces. I'm going to cut them down, and then I should be able to just sew them with a basic 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I should be Gucci. I want the seam allowance to be a little bit smaller than I normally do 1/2 inch, but I want it to be a little bit smaller because I don't want these seams to be pronounced, and because it's going to be smacked between a liner, if I get it too big, it might show through, and I really don't want attention there. So we're going to do a 1/4 inch. We're going to make sure that we press our seams. I know I don't normally go through all the effort of pressing my seams, but I think it's important in this instance. So I'm going to make sure and do that, so that way all my seams lay nice and nice. Okay, so now all of our bodice triangle pieces are sewn together, both the liner and the outside. So now we have 4 all together. And so that means we are on to the next step. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to sew the triangles together a little bit along the bodice, or along the cleavage area. I'd like to keep this modest, you know, so I can wear it in multiple settings. That, and I just want to be comfortable, okay? But I'm going to sew it together towards the bottom, and just so that way I can have a little bit better coverage, so that way I'm not gaping all the way down. And so I'm going to take the 2 prettiest pieces, because these do have a little bit of variation in them. They do have a pattern. Some of them have not quite as much color. They're mostly white. And then others have quite a bit of color, have quite a bit of pattern on them. And so I'm going to choose 2 of the ones with the most, that I deem the prettiest, that have the most color and pattern on them. And I'm going to sew, I think it's about 4 inches. And I'm just going to sew from the bottom up about 4 inches, just to kind of bring them together a little bit, make them just to give me a little bit of extra comfort with this. But I'm actually going to do it to both sides. I'm going to do pretty one to pretty one, and then I'm going to do liner to liner one, and then I'm going to take both of those and I'm going to sew them to each other, so that way we can have right sides together, flip it inside out, and then we will have our liner and our outside all sewn together. Also going to leave a bit of a gap. I'm not going to sew this top part of my triangle. I'm going to kind of leave that open for now, because I think that will make it a little bit easier to attach our tie later. And if not, I can always just go back and sew it down later. But I'm going to leave it open for now, and I'm just going to sew along the edges, so that way it's all connected to each other. But watch me do. Alright, now that we have the upper bodice figured out, and it is playing nicely. It's playing nice. It looks nice. It seems to cover what needs to be covered. It's forming to what needs to be formed. We won't know for sure if it's worked out until we actually attach it to the waistband, but for now, she's looking good. So, that being said, we are going to go ahead and move on to the waistband. Okay, so the waistband is going to be into two parts. The first one, the easy one, is going to be the front waistband, and that's going to be what goes here, connects the upper bodice to the skirt, and it's just going to be easy peasy. We're going to attach a liner to it. We're going to attach this to the piece that we just made, the bodice, and then it'll be all hunky-dory. The second part of the waistband is going to be a little bit trickier because we are going to be adding faux shearing to it. That's why it's so much longer, because it's going to be cinched with elastic. But more on that later. This time take a little bit more explaining. For now, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to take our waistband piece. We're going to attach it to the bodice piece. We're going to attach front side to front side and then liner side to liner side, making sure that the prettiest side is facing out so that way we have a lovely dress. And then after that we will get into the back bodice piece, but we will get to that in a minute. For now, the easy stuff. Alright, now we have the entirety of the front bodice. So we have the top, we have the waistband, inside and out, liner, and outside, all finished. So now we move on to the tricky bit. So, we are doing faux shearing. And shearing itself is actually, I don't want to say simple, but common. Very common. Generally, it involves taking thread and elastic and sewing it in long lines along your fabric, so that way when you're done, the elastic in the thread cinches it all together so that way it hugs your body. Really simple process. But unfortunately, the process of adding that to your fabric is actually rather difficult for a home sewer. One, you have to get the special elastic thread. Two, you have to have special settings on your sewing machine. You have to fiddle with the tension to make sure it's just right. And I've never successfully done it. That, and I also don't have the tools for that right now. I don't have the elastic thread. It's just, it would be a lot of work. It would be a lot of trial and error, and I don't really want to do that right now. I mean, I will conquer it some other time. I will conquer it another time. Right now, we're gonna do something that I kind of just thought up, and I thought it would make use of some resources that I already have. Okay, so I have a lot of this really stretchy, really strong, thin elastic. Most of it is from pulling apart bed sheets and pulling fitted sheets apart and just saving the elastic. There's nothing wrong with it, and I figured I would use it someday. That day is today. So what I'm going to do is, initially when I thought of this idea, I had considered just taking the elastic, stretching it out, sewing it to the fabric, and then watch and see if it contracts. But upon further inspection, I don't think that will work quite the way I'm thinking. I may do some trial and error later and see how that works, but for the moment, I'm actually going to follow a tutorial that I saw online. It was a blog post somewhere. I don't honestly remember where I got it from. But what she ended up doing is that she took 2 panels of fabric and then just ran channels through it every like half an inch or so. And what that did was it created space by attaching the elastic to either end and then having the open space in between so it can contract and pull apart. It made sure that there was no stress on your fabric itself, but it also allowed this elastic to expand and contract as it was meant to. And I really think that's a cool idea, and I think that will work a lot better than my idea, because my idea, I'm not sure if it would work well. This is a lot denser of a fabric than I think would be possible for that. I'm not sure if it would flex the way it's supposed to with the thread running through the elastic, so I think this will work much better. And so what I'm going to do is, this is my back bodice piece. I know it's large, but it has to be. It will contract and it will be much smaller. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these two pieces together, because this is my outside of my liner anyway. And then I'm going to sew long lines from one end to the other, so that way I have channels to run my elastic through. Then I'll attach everything on one end, run the elastic through the channels, and then attach that on the other end with the elastic pulled tight, so that way when everything's sewed in place and you let go, it will pull it smaller. But that's the idea, that's the thought process, and now we must put it into action. Okay, so now that we have run all the channels through it, now we're going to start, not completely, but start threading through the elastic. So I have 11 channels, 2 thick ones and 9 small ones. And I'm going to take bits of elastic that are, I'm honestly going to do half. I want this to be sturdy and I want it to scrunch correctly. But I'm going to take a whole bunch of these safety pins. Luckily I have quite a few. And I'm going to attach the elastic to the safety pins and then start threading it through my channels. But I'm not going to pull it all the way, because I need to have the tail sticking out, so that way I can sew one edge to my bodice to tack them all into place, and then I'll be able to take the elastic the rest of the way through the channels, pull it tight, and attach it to the opposite side of the bodice. Okay, so now we have secured one end, and I have made doubly sure that it's not going anywhere. I'm going to trim off these little extra bits of elastic, but then we're just going to take the elastic that's still inside in the middle. We're going to use the safety pins that we attached, and we're just going to run it through all the way to the other side. And we'll pull it out a little bit, basically just like we did on the first side, and we're going to bring it around and attach it to the other end of the bodice. It's been an endeavor in the making, but it's coming together very well. I'm excited for it. Hopefully you are too. It's pulled, it's secured. I did things I'm not proud of. So, it worked how intended. It really did. I mean, look at this. That looks like shearing. That really does. It's too much. If I were to do this over again, I would do every other line with the elastic, not every line. I don't know what it was. I thought that I didn't think it's tiny little elastic. I didn't think, I underestimated the strength of the stretch. Like, I was trying to hold this thing straight so that way I could feed, the safety pins through. It takes so much strength to pull it apart. And I mean, I get it, makes sense. There are 11 things of elastic in here. 2 of them are thick, but the thick ones honestly aren't even doing that much because it's all of the stacked little ones in between. It's just so much. But that being said, I mean, look at this thing. Look at it. I mean, it just turned out so nice. But again, if you ever choose to do this on your own, leave gaps in between your elastic. I had such a time trying to feed those safety pins around the ruffles. They were coming undone. They were poking my fingers. Through the magic of editing, this probably looked like it took 5 seconds. It took me an hour and a half. An hour and a half to feed safety pins through little channels. That's insane. But if you ever go to do this again, please learn from my mistakes. Leave gaps in between so it's easier to feed through the channels, and use good hardy safety pins so that way they're not bending and breaking apart. I had to pull one out with pliers. But in any case, this now means that we are ready to take it and attach it on the other side of the bodice, and then we're going to take the liner, fold it over the edge, and then tack it all down so that way we don't have any raw seams. My hands hurt, but we did it. I think if I actually managed to get this thing around my waist, it would probably suffocate me at this point, or break a rib. Means we must now face the unfortunate fact that I've got to remake it. I don't think I have the strength. We're gonna come back tomorrow. And we're gonna try again. I don't have the strength today. Alright, it is a new day, it is a new dawn, and now we're ready to try this again. So, I actually already did it. I did this off camera. I made a new one. It has a lot better flex to it. It's not so tight and crazy. I didn't re-record it. I just basically did what I recommended. Is I went back. I did the same lines, but I put elastic in every other channel instead of every channel. I also didn't do quite as little. I think in the original I did like 12 inches. That was stupid. That was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. The actual span that it needs to cover is about 20 inches. And with this many elastics, I didn't think I needed to take that much off, so I ended up only doing it 18. So 2 inches less than the actual span it needs to cover, but it turned out much better. Much better. Much better flex. I've already tried it on. I'm not going to go through the embarrassment of doing that on camera again. But now we're to the point where the inside liner of the bodice, we're going to use it to cover up the seams that we just did. So I attached the shearing to the front bodice piece right here. And then this here is our liner piece. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it over, I think, about 1/2 inch. See, I worked with my dad, and now I've got to double check all my measurements. Usually much more lapse than 3 days. Yeah, it's 1/2 inch. See, and this is why I know 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 5/8. Use them all the time. Anyway, but I'm gonna fold it over about 1/2 inch, which is what I had originally intended as my seam allowance. Anyway, and then we're just going to take that folded edge right over this seam. Let me see if I can do that on camera in the air. It's kind of finicky because the elastic wants to contract all over the place. But we're just gonna take it. This is that folded edge. and this is the shirring, and right underneath, if you can see it, is our raw edge. So folding that over and laying that over just kind of covers our raw edge so there's nothing poking in at us. And I didn't realize about this time, but this fabric really likes to fray. It's just, close up of that. Look at all those strings. Look at all that nonsense. So we're going to be taking this raw edge and just kind of bringing it in so that way it's protected so it doesn't fray out as much, and also so that way it doesn't itch against our skin. But we're going to do that on each side. I'm going to tack it down with pins because the elastic is funky to play with. But I'm going to tack it down with pins, sew it into place, and then we will move on to the skirt. Finally! Bodice is completely done. All seams. This isn't a seam. This isn't a seam. This is going to be attached to the skirt. But all seams tucked in, tucked away, and shirring is done. Lovely and actually stretchy enough to fit over my body. Oh. Okay, but that is done. So we're going to tuck that away for now. Not gonna lie, I don't want to look at it much longer. I've looked at it too long. But it's now onto the skirt. And first thing we're gonna do is, if you remember correctly, I did not have enough fabric. It was not wide enough for me to do a full circle skirt, so I did 2 halves. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna take my 2 half pieces and I'm just gonna sew them together along the straight edge. It's gonna be this one. Luckily it was the edge of the curtain. I'm just going to go alongside it and make it into a full circle. Easy peasy. That was easy. Alright, it really was. It was just 2 seams and now we have a full circle skirt attached on all ends. So now all I have to do is I have to take this and attach it to our bodice. And I'm just going to attach it on the front piece, the outside piece, not the liners. But I'm basically going to do the same thing that I did with the sides of the shirring on the bodice. I'm going to use the liner piece to fold over and then tuck the raw edges inside so that way we don't have to worry about it. And I kind of did this slightly on purpose, but when I did my circle skirt, I used the edge of the curtain so that way this also wouldn't be a raw edge. So if I play my cards right, there's not going to be a raw edge open on any part of this. So we're on the right track. But first I gotta take my opening and I'm gonna tack it down and pin it to my bodice. Around the shirring, it's going to get a little bit funky. Elastic can be hard to work around, so I'm just going to move slowly and carefully and attach all the right pieces together. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. Okay, so now that we have attached the skirt to the bodice, what we're going to do is we're going to do basically the same thing we did on the side seams. We're going to take the liner, we're going to fold it over, like, this one's probably going to be a bit smaller because my liner is kind of getting eaten up a little bit. It's like we're using it on more things, but probably about 1/4 inch or so. and then we're just going to lay it over the seam we just made and sew it down. It's like, and this seam should also, it's like these stitches should also kind of get lost. It's like they'll just kind of disappear into the seam on the outside. You shouldn't be able to see it very well. If you really want to be complicated about it, you can actually go from the other side and sew along the crease. So like where the bodice meets the skirt, you can sew along here so that way you can't see it at all. That one's a little bit tricky because you have to very precisely pin down your fabric to make sure that it catches on that spot. I generally don't do it that way, but if you really want real clean lines, then that's the best way to do it. But I am running low on time, so we're just going to do it the easy way, and we're going to pin it and then sew it from the inside, the wrong side. Then after that, it is on to the straps for the halter neck, and then the hemline, and then we're done. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie, while I was pinning everything into place, I decided to do it from the outside and sew it along the seam on the outside so it'd be cleaner. It just looks so nice right now. It is just everything's smooth. There are no raw edges. It is probably like one of the cleanest sewing projects I've done in a while, and it's just so nice. And I'm like, do I want the possibility of some wibbly wonky seam thread line going across the, like, no one would see it, no one would, but I would see it. And so I have turned it right side out again, and now I'm just going to sew along the seam, and I've pinned everything in place in the back so that way it will catch the edges of the liner and hold everything in place. Could this drive me insane? Could I miss the edges? Could I hit a pin wrong and throw everything off? Absolutely. Am I doing it anyway? Absolutely. So, let's get into it. Alright, now that we have completely tacked down the liner, there are no raw edges anywhere! Except for, the hemline and what we're about to work on. But anyway, no raw edges on the inside, which is fantastic. So, now we're going to move on to the tie and back. And I have two little rectangles. I made use of the hemline of the curtain, and basically I'm gonna make this a fairly large tie. I think it would be kind of cute to have, like, when I'm wearing it, have like a big cute bow in the back. I think that would be adorable. So I'm going to take these and fold them over right sides together, and then I'm just gonna go over this to make sure that it's closed up, and then I'm just going to sew along the raw edge side, flip it inside out, and then we'll move on to attaching it to the rest of the dress. Simple, super simple, super simple. Okay, so these things could use a good iron. They're kind of rounding themselves out. But I wanted to go ahead and show you what we're going to do next. So, I have these ends. And what I'm going to do, because they still have raw edges, and we've all agreed, that we want no raw edges on this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this edge and I'm just going to kind of fold it in on itself. Just tuck it on the inside. And so that puts that like that. And then I'm going to take the raw edge of this guy and I'm going to shove it in there. And then the raw edges get tucked in here, and then you don't have anything sticking out. And then I'm just going to sew along this line here. So we'll have a sewing line, but we won't have any open edges or raw edges anywhere. And I've figured this was the easiest way to attach these guys. And so with that, I'm going to attach these two, and then we'll move on to hemming, and then we'll be done. Okay, so I tried it on and I had to go back. So the sash wasn't working. I had grand lovely plans of a giant bow in the back. And honestly, it would have been lovely, but unfortunately I made them too short. They weren't long enough to tie a full bow. You could tie like a knot, but then that was about it. And when I tied the knot, it was just like so heavy on the back of my neck, so I decided to kill the bow. But what I ended up doing is that I actually ended up making the straps even smaller, and I happened to have some snaps lying around. And so I just used those instead. I tacked them on, and so now it just snaps behind my neck. It's not as heavy, it's not as thick, it doesn't pull as much, and so ultimately I just think that that turned out better. But with that, our little sundress is finally done. It's lovely. And now you get to see what it looks like on. So I love it. I just feel so classy. I just feel sophisticated and elegant. And I don't know if it's just like the silhouette with the halter neck and the big billowy skirt. Maybe it's the hat. Maybe it's a mix of the two. I feel like Marilyn Monroe. Not the same face, not the same body, but I feel just that sort of elegance and confidence and just... Don't you know diamonds are a girl's best friend? Lovely. I feel lovely. And it took a little bit of work. It did. It took a little bit of work. It took some figuring out, but honestly that is the process of crafting, especially when you're learning something new. It just takes some time to figure things out. And if you try something new, it's not always going to work out. But we learn some things, and we learn some things for later. And I think that's an amazing thing. So now, if I ever need to do shearing again, I know exactly what to do. If I ever do a halter neck, I think if I were to do it again, I'd probably bring it in just a little bit. When I pull my arms forward, it's just a little much. I'd probably bring it in, you know, just about that much, where it's still coverage, but I think that's like an inch on each side. But you learn. You live, you learn, you do better next time. But thank you so much for joining me in making this dress. I know this was a little bit of a long haul, so thank you for coming along with me. And I hope to see you in my next videos. I'll have more sewing projects in the future. That is a guarantee. And we'll also explore some other things. Like next up, I think I'm going to try my hand at brewing. But it's not what you think. It's not what you think. Spoilers! But thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, leave a like, comment, or subscribe for more content in the future. But until then, live a life full of love. Thank you. Bye.